Hello, my name is Jeff Warder and I'm speaking to you today from St. James Westminster Anglican Church in London, Ontario, Canada. I have been an audio engineer for the past 25 years, and while I have worked with many different genres of music, my freelance career has largely focused on location recordings for classical music ensembles, and in particular, choirs. In my years of recording choirs, a recurring challenge often arose during the mixing process. I found myself needing to rebalance the ensemble sections, even if for only a few bars. As these were usually live performances, there was no practical way to independently adjust the volume, timbre, or ratio of direct to reverberant sound between the sections. Simply put, the lack of isolation between tracks resulted in a recording that was unbalanced, and the quality wasn't what I thought it could be. Having also worked in traditional recording studios, I knew of techniques employed in that environment to minimize or eliminate the background sound from other instrumental or vocal sections captured by a microphone. Recording studios rely on the use of isolation booths or baffles to achieve isolation between musicians. Oftentimes, they record the musicians at different times in a process called overdubbing. This provides the audio engineer with clean, isolated tracks to balance during the mix stage, which, based on my experience, leads to a better quality recording. I decided to try recording choirs in a studio environment, but these early attempts did not go well. The singers worked really hard, but complained about not being able to hear one another, and as a result, they tended to oversing, pushing themselves out of tune and destroying the blend of the section. I wanted to produce better quality recordings, but did not know how to overcome these difficulties. How could I improve isolation during a location recording? Could I incorporate some of the techniques from traditional recording studios without negatively affecting the musician's performance? What types of supports do musicians, and in particular, singers, require? Before I could design an experiment to address these questions, I first had to learn what the relevant literature could offer me. I undertook an exhaustive review of the resources relating to sound quality, acoustics, recording and playback techniques, and sound perception. What I learned from this review helped me to establish the 4 foundational premises of my research project. The first premise is that musicians require a certain amount of reverberation within the performance space to allow them to hear themselves and one another if they are to perform to the best of their ability. Several studies supported this. The second premise is closely related to the first. It is that the recording location must provide the performers with good acoustics. The question of how to measure the acoustic quality of a space is one that involves physics, architectural acoustics, and aesthetics. It was very interesting to learn that much of the literature demonstrated that listeners largely prefer recordings that have been completed in a natural acoustic venue versus those that have been recorded in a studio and processed to simulate a real acoustic environment. One study in particular demonstrated that listeners could distinguish between real and simulated acoustic spaces and concluded that the listeners found real venues to be superior for their naturalness and imaging accuracy. The third premise is that the conductor's role is paramount in shaping and refining the ensemble's performance. The conductor is responsible for determining the number of musicians required, for learning and interpreting the piece, and for making decisions on tempi, dynamics, and balance. During the rehearsals and performances, the conductor provides visual direction and real-time feedback to the group, shaping phrases, cueing and cutting off sections, all while performing a live mix of the group by signaling for more or less volume from the various sections. The fourth and final premise is that standard 5.1 surround sound playback provides a superior listening experience to that of traditional stereo. With stereo playback, both the direct and the reverberant sound come from 2 speakers in front of the listener. In 5.1 playback, there are 3 speakers in front of the listener to provide a focused image on the direct sound, along with 2 speakers behind the listener for the reverberant sound. This means that surround sound playback offers a higher quality listening experience along with greater listener envelopment. My review of the literature also provided me with other knowledge that was essential for the design of my experiment. The work of Mehta, Johnson, and Rocafort proved to be an excellent resource. In their book, Architectural Acoustics, Principles in Design, they established that the terms used to describe sound qualities, such as reverberance, clarity, intimacy, spaciousness, warmth, brilliance, and loudness, were not merely subjective descriptors, but could be accurately correlated to measurable acoustic parameters. Their text provided instruction on how to measure and calculate these values using formulas, and also identified values found in halls considered to have fair, good, or excellent acoustics. I now had a way to determine the acoustic quality of a potential recording venue. It was interesting to note that historically, listeners' preferences have changed somewhat over time, and that there is some variation between people on what qualifies as good acoustics. It was equally interesting to learn that certain venues are better suited to one particular genre of music than to another. The literature on surround sound microphone technique agreed that most surround sound techniques are directly related to and originate from traditional stereo techniques. Each of these traditional stereo techniques have pros and cons, and some of them can be incorporated into various surround sound microphone techniques. I discovered that Ron Stryker's surround decatree allows the audio engineer to capture detailed sound from the front as well as cohesive reverberance in the rear channels. This microphone technique uses a T-shaped mounting bracket to hang 5 microphones, a sound field B format mic in the front position, 2 wide cardioid pattern mics facing forward, and 2 hypercardioid mics facing the rear of the hall. I now had all of the knowledge I needed to design my research project. I decided to try to address 3 questions. First, which type of oral feedback do musicians prefer during performance, and how do they feel these different types of feedback affect their performance? Second, do musicians feel that a live conductor can be adequately replaced with a video recording of a conductor? And finally, will the use of an overdubbed method result in a recording that is superior to one that is completed using the traditional live recording methods? To answer these questions, I completed 3 location recordings using 3 different methodologies. The first was a traditional live recording where everyone performed in the same room at the same time with a live conductor directing them. During this performance, the conductor was videotaped. The second was an overdubbed methodology where the various sections were recorded at separate times using loudspeakers for oral feedback and the video recording of the conductor created during the first performance to visually direct the performers. The third recording was also an overdub methodology using the same video recording of the conductor, but headphones instead of loudspeakers for oral feedback. The video recording of the conductor was presented on a 27-inch video monitor placed in the same location as the conductor. The following parameters were held constant for each of the 3 recordings: the musicians participating, the surround decatree microphone technique, the microphone position, the venue used for the recordings, that is St. James Westminster Anglican Church, the positioning of the musicians within the room, the piece of music performed, the 5.1 surround sound playback system, and the listening environment used by the expert listeners to evaluate the sound quality of each of the 3 recordings. To assess the results of the experiment, a questionnaire was given to the performers immediately after having completed all 3 recordings in order to determine their preferences and to elicit their feelings on the different recording methodologies. Results showed that traditional live acoustics was the most preferred method of oral feedback. There was also a strong preference for the live conductor over the video conductor, as some felt that the real-time interaction was important. However, many commented that these preferences may be due to the fact that this methodology is the most familiar to them. There was some indication that the use of headphones for oral feedback could become more comfortable, provided they were given time to become accustomed to it. There were also criticisms that the size of the video monitor was too small, making it harder to follow than the real conductor. To compare the sound quality of the 3 recordings, a panel of 10 expert listeners evaluated the sound quality parameters in a controlled listening environment using 5.1 surround sound playback. The listening was done individually, and none of the listeners was informed as to which recording they were listening to. The panel was given a questionnaire that asked them to rank the 3 recordings from favorite to least favorite and to rate each recording on 9 parameters using a 5-point scale. 6 of those parameters were related to sound quality and 3 were related to the ensemble's performance ability. The panel was also encouraged to offer comments on each parameter. The results were graphed and showed a strong preference for the traditional live recording technique. However, it was interesting to note that on the 2 overdubbed recordings, several of the sound quality parameters, such as reverberance, intimacy, and clarity, were rated as highly as or more highly than the traditional live recording. Given that a traditional live recording technique was strongly preferred by both performers and expert listeners, this experiment did not resolve my search for an improved recording methodology for classical choral ensembles. Nevertheless, it did offer some insights and suggest future areas of research. The use of an overdubbed methodology did result in recordings that were rated more highly on several different sound quality parameters. However, the lower quality of performance on the overdubbed recordings may have been the reason why the traditional live recording was preferred overall. Given that the use of headphones for oral feedback was strongly preferred over loudspeakers, it may be that an overdubbed recording methodology using headphones could result in a superior recording if the performers were to become more familiar with it. It may also be that the use of a larger video display so that the conductor appears life-sized would result in a performance of equal quality to the live recording. The provision of a realistic visual feedback from a conductor is essential. Unfortunately, at the present time, one cannot use an overdub methodology without substituting the conductor with a video, since a human is not capable of identically repeating a performance time after time. One could speculate that as holographic projection technology improves, the use of a three-dimensional conductor might be more successful than that of a flat screen. This study might also have been improved if multiple audio engineers created mixes of the recordings, thus providing several versions of each methodology to be scored by the expert listening panel. Thank you for your time.